Hello, this is your instructor Taz Talley, and in this particular video I'd like to go over and show you how to perform an analysis and color and tone correction of an image that has a few nuances to it. Uh, Normally, and in the previous videos in this course, we've talked about using neutrals to do color corrections, using skin tones to do color corrections, and sometimes we have images that have both neutrals and skin tones. And or we may have other challenges such as lighting challenges, some nuances associated with lighting. So not all images are particularly straightforward, and it's not uncommon to have some different challenges in an image, and this is an example of one. So I thought we'd take the next step up in our game and talk about non-standard images or images that have maybe more than one type of color correction area, such as neutrals and skin tones, and maybe some lighting issues as well. So this is an example of an image. This is a portrait, obviously. This is my friend Karen, and she's standing on the shores of Ketchimek Bay, which is where we both live in Alaska. And it's an outdoor portrait, right? It's an informal outdoor portrait. And obviously our analysis of this image is going to be based around the skin tones. And oh, I should remind you, I forgot to, but just remember we're using our color correction workspace, our custom color correction workspace. And you've got my info tool set to 3x3, right? And I always keep the the eyedropper tool on the normal tool and access the variations using keyboard shortcuts. Okay, the other thing I've done here is I've made a duplicate copy of the image. Here's the original, which I reduce and put in the background, so use it as a reference image. And then I've got the working image, and that way I never touch the original. Okay, so we've got our color correction workspace up here, and we've got our histogram panel and the info panel. Both of these are data driven, right? So that's why they're together. Visual, histogram, qualitative, and then quantitative info panel. And then we've got layers and then properties. And the reason why we have the properties panel pinned to the layers panel is once we add an adjustment layer, the adjustments for that layer will come up right down here in properties. Okay, so let's dig into the image a little bit. Two of the key things we use for adjusting tone and color are neutrals and skin tones, right? Does this image have neutrals? Yes. We've got neutrals here. We've got white snow in the background. That's a white diffuse highlight perhaps. But we also have skin tone. What's this image about? Skin tones. So we do have neutrals, but we also have the primary issue here, which is going to be the skin tones. So I'm not really going to pay attention to that white diffuse highlight in the background. I might want to make sure that it doesn't blow out because then it can become distracting. But I'm not going to worry so much about the color balance of this neutral white highlight area here as I am about the overall color balance of the skin tone area. Second thing I see here is, remember in the previous video we talked about skin tone adjustments, that we like to focus on using well-lit portions of an image, right, for skin tone. So we're going to focus on the well-lit portion of the skin tone because, one, our eye is drawn there, right, because our eye is drawn to the well-lit rather than the cast shadow portion of the image. And in general, color balances tend to be different in the highlight areas, in the well-lit areas compared with the cast shadow areas. So we are going to pay attention to that, but we are going to also avoid any areas like this where there's a little bit of reflection. You can get some aberrant RGB data set values there. So we're not going to pay attention to the neutrals. We're going to focus on the skin tones, and we're going to focus primarily on the well-lit, but we're going to monitor the cast shadow as well because we don't want that to be way off, and it can give us some valuable information about the overall color balance of the image as we're adjusting. But one thing we do want to pay attention to, and that is the brightest highlight. Is there a diffuse white highlight in this image, and shadow area. So let's go ahead and do that first, get that out of the way. Let's go ahead and add a curves adjustment layer, my favorite tool, because I can do just about everything with that in terms of tone and color adjustments. By the way, keyboard shortcut, hold down the Option on Mac, Alt on Windows, before you click and create the curves or any adjustment layer, and it automatically allows you to name that adjustment layer. So I'm going to call this CC for color correction. That's kind of the shortcut that I use for color correction. It creates a color correction layer with a layer mask along with it if you want to use it. I'm just going to click on the adjustment layer portion, and voila, right? The curves dialog comes up here, and where we can access the master curve, the red, the green, the blue. And notice the keyboard shortcuts, right? Option 3, 4, and 5 for the 3 individual channels, Option 2, and that's Alt on Windows. So it comes up, and we can use this to help us find the brightest highlights and the darkest shadows. We'll go ahead and turn on show clipping for black and whites, or you can just use your option key, Alt in Windows, and then click on the highlight end, and that shows us where the brightest areas of the image is. We might have thought that it was back here in the snow, but it's not. It's right here. And the reason why this is important to pay attention to, space and command, space and control, space bar to move over, is this is potentially a problem area if it's blown out. There's a few pixels that looks like they're blown out, but not many, right? But I'm going to go ahead and put a color sampler point right in here. Space command to zoom in. I want to get the lightest portion of this just so I know. That's pretty good. We don't have to be too anal about this. All right, that's pretty good. There we go. And let's look at our value. 241, 245, 250. So there is a 250 value in there. Remember, if you want to move these, you hold down the shift key, right? And you can drag this, move it that way. 245, 245, 247, 250. Command 1 to take us back. Space bar if we want to move our image around. All right. Very handy keyboard shortcuts to use. And I think I mentioned, I don't remember, make sure your eyedropper tool is set to 3x3. It's set that way, should be set that way, set up that way in your custom color correction workspace, but I always just do a visual check just to make sure. All right, so there's the lightest portion of our image. It would be potentially a problem if it were blown out, pure white, might be too bright, and it's something we may want to tone down later. All right, this is in, we've got one value, the blue, in 251. The red and the green are down in the mid 240s. So nothing's completely blown out. So we're safe in terms of, blown out highlight values. And we can decide whether or not we want to tune that up. But notice now, let's just pause for a minute and compare these values. 245, 247, good mid-tone, highlight value, right? 251, the blue is higher than the red and the green, and that corroborates what we see here in the histogram, doesn't it? On the highlight end, the blue histogram is offset to the right of the red and the green, thereby confirming with the highlight distribution of the histogram data that this image does indeed have a blue color cast. Remember from our initial analysis, when we were looking at these histograms, we see that when we perform an initial analysis of the histogram, we see that the red channel is kind of offset to the right of the green channel, which is offset to the right of the blue channel, in relationship to the shadow end. See, on the blue end, we see the blue is offset to the right, and that's indicated here, right? But it's curious, sometimes the shadow end can be useful as well. So it looks like that the red is offset to the left of the green, and the green is offset to the left of the blue from the midtone to the shadow end, indicating that maybe it's not just a blue cast in this image, but a blue-green color cast, particularly around the midtone area. So that it's very subtle, but it's an important piece of information we're going to tuck away and use as we add some more control points here. All right, so we've got the highlight end, blue. The rest of the histogram suggests, maybe a blue-green color cast. And the red seems to be diminished in the midtone to the shadow portion because it's offset to the left. But before we go any further, let's go ahead and find our shadow point. Let's just click here on the shadow end and drag it, and we see, oh yeah, we've got a dark shadow area, one underneath each collar, space command. We'll go ahead and zoom in, and we'll just find the darkest area of this image. All right, and there we go, right there. And then shift key to create a control point, and there we go, and command 1 and the space bar just to move the image around, place us anywhere we want to, okay? And let's look at our value, 0, 0, 2. Always remember to return the sliders to where you started, all right, for sure. 0, 0, 2, so we don't have any detail there. The question is, do we care? For this particular image, the answer is no. It's not a product shot. It's not a clothing shot. If we lose a little bit of shadow detail in there, not a big deal. It's something we could pay attention to, and I could adjust because there is data there, but I'm not going to spend time going after that. I'm all about the skin tones. All right, but we do know we've got a plugged-in shadow, but it's a very unimportant portion of the image. We have a pretty bright highlight up here. So long as it's not distracting, taking any attention away from our skin tones, we're good to go. All right, so where do we go next? Well, we want to take a look at the skin tone values. So we want to place some color sampler points. And as we've talked about, we want to place a color sampler point on the well-lit portion of the skin tone, but away from any potential reflections. All right, so I'm going to hold down my shift key, and I'm going to click over here, make sure that I'm going to click on an area that's well lit, but no reflections. All right. And then I'm going to click over here in the cast shadow because a significant portion of this image, right, is in cast shadow as far as the skin tone is concerned. We may or may not use this point to actually adjust the image, but we can use it to certainly monitor the values. In fact, let's start there. Let's evaluate our RGB values. And just a quick reminder in terms of RGB value data sets, we're not looking for neutrals, right? Skin tones are not neutrals unless you're Star Trek Cardassians. They have gray skin, but humans do not. Red should be greater than green, should be greater than blue. That's the baseline, right? But even a little bit more important than just that basic RGB, red greater than green greater than blue, is the red-green separation should be greater than the green-blue separation, right? And one of the questions you always ask is how much, and that's one of the things I want to dig into on this particular image. But let's go look at the RGB values. For color sample point number 3, right, the quarter tone, and then the mid-tone color sample point number 4. RGB values, 195, 178, 177. The red is greater than the green, which is good, but the green and blue, they're almost identical, right? Same thing over even in the cast shadow. Red is high, that's good, 121 versus 98, that's good, but the blue is actually higher by 1 point. They're essentially equal. So the most obvious thing that we see here is that there is a blue color cast on the skin tone, no doubt about it. And if you're used to looking at skin tones, you brought the image up, you might have even picked it up, that the skin doesn't have a lot of warmth to it, and now we see why. It's because of the blue. The human eye doesn't do a particularly good job of doing quantitative analysis of anything if it doesn't have a comparison. But you can see that skin tone is not particularly warm, and it's because of the blue color cast. All right, so we might be encouraged to just go right after that blue color cast, and we could. But here's where a little bit of nuance of evaluation comes in. It's going to save us some time and result in us getting a really good correction with not a lot of effort. I want to not just look at the offset of the blue. Yes, we need to lower the blue value, no question about it. All right, the question is how much? And typically we want to set the green-blue separation based upon what the red-green separation is. And typically we look for 5 to 4 to 3, somewhere in that range, where the green-blue separation should be about half of the red-green separation as a starting place, and then we can fine-tune from there. But let's look at the red-green separation first. 178 to 195 and 98 to 121. There's about a 20-point separation here, right? 78 to 88, 88 to 98, not quite 20 points. This one is 98 to 121, 22 points. So on average between these two, one, they show a similar color cast, which is good. So that simplifies the overall color balance adjustment. We can see that they're about 20 points. But I can tell you from experience that when you're working in a highlight to mid-tone area, you want typically at least 30 points of separation, particularly on a well-lit portion of the image. So although the red is greater than the green, and significantly so, 20 points, it's not enough, all right? And this is where we come back now to our little heads up that we gave ourselves. That red is diminished, right, in the mid-tone to three-quarter tone. In fact, across the tonal spectrum, the red is lower. It's getting lower red values than we should. So instead of going after the blue first, all right, which would not be wrong, but it's not going to be as good as going after the red first here. I want to raise the red, and then we'll go ahead and set the green-blue. We'll set the blue after we set the red. So let's go ahead and go to our red channel, Option 2 or Alt 3, or Alt 3 to take us to the red channel. And notice that we can place color control points based upon the color sampler points, right? I can do that. I'm going to go Command, Control on Mac, Command on Mac, Control on Windows, and we click, and it automatically puts a color control point right here on the curve, right? When we do a Command or Control and click on number 4, we get the color control point set around the midtone. We now have 4 control points, right? The highlight, the default highlight and default shadow, and then we've got a quarter tone and the midtone. The question is, do we need to adjust both of these points, or can we just adjust one, all right? And since we're focused on the well-lit portion of the image, let's use that one. I'm going to go ahead and hit the delete key. Remember, you can tell which color the control point is selected by its solid, and you see the crosshair right there. So I'm just going to hit the delete key, boom. Then I'm going to press the plus sign, all right, until my quarter tone point is selected here. All right. Then I'm just going to use the up and down arrow, and you'll notice it's going to adjust the entire curve as I do this. All right. But if I keep both control points, I'm going to have to go back and forth between these two control points. And I can get it exactly the way I want it, but it's kind of time consuming. If I can do this with one control point, I'm going to be good. And I'm going to focus on, right, the most important point, which is the well-lit portion of the image. So we're going to focus on right here. This is 178 to 195. It's just a few points below 20 points, so it's around 20 points. I'm just going to get my up arrow, okay, and watch over here on this control point, and then also monitor the RGB values, particularly look at the red value. I'm just going to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right, and I'm just going to move it up 6 points until it's 208. All right, now we've got 178 to 188, 188 to 198, and 198 to 208. Now we've got 30 points of separation between the red and the green values. All right, and if we move over to here, and remember that the left-hand values here in the info panel are our starting values, and then the right-hand values are our ending values. So we had about 20-point starting values. Now we have 30 points. Same thing here, right? We've got 98. So let's call that 100, and then 100 to 110 to 120, 130. This is almost now 40 points of separation, all right? And we may decide that that's too much. If we wanted to, we could come down here, add another control point, and reduce that a little bit in the 3/4 tone if we wanted to. Right, we could come down here and do this. Right, we could put a control point on number 4. And if we decide we wanted to, I don't want it quite 40, I'd like it to be just a little bit lower, all right? We can do that. We can lower that a little bit. If we want to fine tune that color adjustment in the 3/4 tone, or not, we may just leave it the way it is. So we have the option. But by starting with the well-lit highlight, it just makes it a simple adjustment overall. Boom. Now, let's take a look at a couple of things. First of all, let's turn off the application of this red curve adjustment layer and just do a visual analysis of this image on screen. Notice the blue color cast and notice the warming. Look at that, just that one adjustment. How much better that skin tone looks. Also, take a look at the histogram. All right, it's a real-time adjustment, right? Do you see how that red histogram is now offset to the right of where it was? And notice how the highlight ends of the red, the green, and the blue are now, they're getting closer to matching up. All right, we're not really trying to neutralize the image by looking at neutrals, but we're doing an overall neutralization of the image by lining up the histograms, but we're using curves to do it. So just that one little adjustment right there, and deciding to go with the red channel first, now we've created the separation that we want right here, right? So we've got about 30 points of separation here, and we've got 35 to 40 points of separation in the shadow. And the reason why it's more in the shadow than it was in the quarter tone is because we made the adjustment here, and there's a greater adjustment in the 3/4 tone area because the curve arches up. And once again, remember that if we want to tone that down just a little bit, we can put a control point there and just drop it down just slightly, so we don't have quite so much adjustment of the increase of the red in the 3/4 tone area. But again, either way, we end up with enormous improvement in the overall color balance of the image. I'm going to go ahead and take that curve out because I'm not unhappy with the overall warmth of the skin tone in the cast shadow. It looks pretty good to me. All right, if we just did that, look at the overall improvement of this image. But we can do better, right? Now that we've got our color separation set at about 30 points, 78 to, remember, 88 to 98 to 208, that's 30 points. Then, now let's take a look at the blue, all right? They're about equal. What do we want this to be? Remember, a good rule of thumb to kind of go after as a starting place is 2 to 1. So if this is 30 points here, it's going to be, what, 15 points separation here. So let's go to the blue channel, Option or Alt and 5, go to the blue channel. Once again, Command, Control, click here, boom, puts the control point right there. Notice it's a little bit further to the left of the red control point. That's because the red was offset so far to the left initially. All right, and then we're just going to, using our down arrow, we're going to adjust this. So we're at 178. So we want to probably be close to, about 15 points, right? So about 160, a 160, see 165, 67, 167. So we're just going to lower this, and we're watching the blue value, right? Until we lower that down to about 167. And we come over here and we see that the blue value has been lowered from 99 to 89. All right? Once again, if we wanted to fine tune the half tone, 3/4 tone, we could. We could command click on here. We could lower this more. We could raise it more, whatever we want to do, all right, to fine tune. I'm pretty happy with just making the adjustment here in the quarter tone area of the image. And once again, let's take a look. Before and after. Before and after. Very nice. What a huge improvement. And notice how the histograms are lining up quite nicely now. All right, now if we just stop there, enormous, amazing improvement. But one more nuance to address here. And that is, remember we talked about the fact initially the red was offset to the green was offset to the blue. We were thinking, right, there might be a little bit of a green color cast to this image. A blue-green color cast to this image. So the green might be a little bit higher than we might normally want it to be for a skin tone. Now, why would that be in this image? Think about the lighting circumstance of this image, right? The sun is way over to the right. It's on the southern horizon. We're getting, look at the cast shadow. Huge low angle cast shadow, right? We're talking about sunset, right? And sunsets tend to be orange, right? And that means yellow. And red plus green, right, is equal to yellow. So bumping up the green makes the image a little bit yellower than we might normally want it, all right? So if we just do this, we've got a great correction. But I'm anal retentive, so I'm going to go try something. I'm going to Option Alt and then 4 and go to the green channel, right? And I'm just going to put a control point right just in the midpoint right here. And I'm going to say, you know what? I think the image, because I'm looking at the histogram, and overall the green was offset to the left of the blue a little bit in the shadow. I'm just going to lower this just a couple of points. All right, let's go up and watch on screen and watch the histogram. Just down, 2 clicks, boom, boom. Up 2 clicks, down 2 clicks. Up 2 clicks, down 2 clicks. I'm just, based upon the circumstances of the image, right? The sunset coloring, I know it's going to be yellow, right? It's going to be hidden in the green. That yellow is hidden in the green because the red plus green is going to give me yellow. And sure enough, when we just lower the green a little bit from that standard 5 to 4 to 3, we move that green a little bit closer to the blue, away from the red, and all of a sudden it looks even better. So let's just go up 2 points, right, and down 2 points. It's so subtle that it's hard to predict, but when you look at it on screen, if you've got a color correct monitor, everything just pops, becomes warmer. Just that one little adjustment. It's a fine tune, and again, it's based upon the context of the lighting of this particular image. So we adjusted the red channel, we adjusted the blue channel based upon the quarter tone. We did it numerically. We did a nice numeric analysis, and then I just did a fine tune based upon the fact that I saw that green was offset to the left of the blue channel, and it was probably a little bit high, and based upon the lighting. So I just knocked it off a little bit to take some of that yellow out there, and boy, it's even better now. So we've got a really nice color corrected image, and you can just turn that off and on, off and on. Boy, what a difference, all right? And remember we talked about our reference image. Here's our reference image here, right? And then there's the beautiful warm skin tones. All right, so are we done? Yeah, well, if we wanted to, we could do a tone adjustment. Let's just do a quick one. We could just go to the Option or Alt 2 and go to the master curve here. All right, what I like to do, as you know, is I like to make a separate curves, and we're just going to call this B and C for brightness and contrast. And I'm going to make a overall brightness adjustment. I'm just going to go to the midtone here. And the reason I'm going to do this is, again, I'm looking at the histograms, and I can see most of the data is well south of the midtone. And this is not a bad looking image, all right? But I'm just going to brighten this thing overall just a little bit. I'm just going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm just going to overall brighten this image a little bit, maybe a little bit more, all right? And notice how it moves the histogram data. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm just going to brighten this overall. And by making a separate B and C, brightness and contrast, I can take a look at those two things separately. So again, I'm letting my histogram be my guide here. I'm overall brightening the entire image. Now, a lot of times we are tempted, and particularly with landscape images, to increase contrast as well. And that is, like, we go put a quarter point here, control point, raise that, put a control point here, lower that to increase contrast. Bad idea. All right, because do you see what it does? It harshens up the image, right? It increases the shadows, over brightens the highlights. Bad idea. Let's get rid of that point, plus, plus. Get rid of the lighting point, plus, all right? I'm just going to overall brighten the image. In fact, if I were going to do anything, I might lower the contrast of this image, all right, rather than raise the contrast of the image. So I'm just going to lighten this image a little bit overall using the midtone. If I wanted to, I could actually come in here, go ahead and put that quarter tone. I might just lower it just a tad, all right? Just 1 or 2 points, and then flatten the 3/4 tone area. This flattens the curve just slightly, right? All right, and there's not just one way to do this, right? All right, we don't have to do that. We can just very fine tune to flatten it. You do not want to increase contrast on skin tone images, all right? So we have options here that we can do. And again, notice I'm navigating using my plus sign. I'm just going to take these control points out. Why? Because I'm pretty darn happy with just the overall lightening of the image. And if I were going to do anything at all, I might just do 1 point there, 1 point here, just down, just to smooth it out, just to flatten it a little bit, because you want to soften the skin tones, right? You don't want to increase those shadows. All right, and then here's our brightness and contrast. All right. Overall improved in brightness and contrast. And the great thing about these curves, right? Curves adjustment layers, is you can come back in anytime you want, go, I'm just going to keep it. All right, I'm just going to go back to just my brightening, and I'm very happy with that. I'm good to go. And then one final thing while we're here, select these two, come up here, and we'll go a new group from layers, all right? And we'll call this C and C plus B and C. And that tells me that I've got my color correction, my brightness and contrast. So if I want to, I can turn both off and on at the same time, right? Or I can go in here and I can separately control one and then the other. All right, well, there we go. So there's color correction taking into account, the various portions of or various variables that impact an image, such as the context, their neutrals. Do we care about the neutrals? Highlight, shadow points, overall color balance. We used our histograms to great effect to provide some nuance about the overall relationship of red to green to blue, and we did a numeric analysis, and we ended up with a much improved image from what we started with. So if we hit the tab key here and we pull this image over here, right, and we bring up our reference image, right, and we look at these two, it's the French-Canadian, say, side by each, where this is the starting image and this is the ending image. Huge improvement. And we use our basic skill set and a lot of nuance to help get a really nice color and tone correction of this image.